Welcome everyone. As you probably know, some of you are already working with it. RapidAuthor 2512 has been released, and today it's time again for our webinar. As always, in this session today, we will give you an overview of new functionality introduced with this latest version of RapidAuthor. And if you have any questions, we will have plenty of time for a Q&A session at the end. And if you need further information, if you need more complex explanations or want to discuss your individual use cases and need a deeper look into specific functionality, please just contact us afterwards and we will set up separate sessions. First, and as usual, we will have a look at features related to preparing your data and your tools. Then we will move on to authoring itself, split into features for S1000D, for DITA, and for general authoring. And at the end of this part, we will also have a look at a couple of new 2D related features and publication improvements. And then, as mentioned, a Q&A session. Let's start with preparation, specifically with data imports. In RapidAuthor 2512, authors can quite easily remove small holes during import. We will show you why that might be relevant. The effect is that it improves import time and project performance if small holes are not relevant to your current authoring task. The holes simplification option in Rapid Configuration, as you can see here on screen, allows you to specify the size of holes that should be ignored and their type. You can define whether both through and blind holes will be removed, or you can remove only through holes that pierce the whole object. Another configurable input setting related to holes is their geometric quality. You can now set a minimum number of corners for holes to ensure the desired quality. In our example here, we will set the quantity of corners to 8, and you will hopefully, visible in Teams, see the difference between before and after. It's not very well visible, but you know, the quality of the holes has changed, or rather the edges that make up the holes. This is quite useful if you want to reduce the overall size of your imported model, as holes are notoriously picky when you don't give them enough polygons. Now you can keep the quality of the holes on an acceptable level while potentially reducing the size of other components. Now, as most of you know, RapidAuthor works with meters. Previously, the user had to check the units of measurement used in the original CAD data and then specify the multiplier to use to convert millimeters, inches, or other measurement units to meters. The importer can now automatically detect and apply the units of measurements defined in the source CAD files. This feature was previously already available in RapidJT components, and now it's available in Rapid Data Converter as well. This automatic detection is supported for several formats we have listed here on the slide. If your format is not in this list, or your CAD data obviously does not contain information about units of measurement, you will see the word unknown underlined here on top of that screenshot in brackets instead of the detected measurement unit. In this case, you can still disable automatic detection and select the appropriate measurement unit with the radio buttons below. In our sample here, it is millimeters. And you can check the result of the size conversion in the sizes section. As in most releases, we reviewed and updated the CAD files supported on import. And as you can see, we have added support for additional CAD data file formats with Rapid Data Converter in this release. For a complete list of currently supported formats, you can always check out our full release notes. So if you don't see a format you are using, please go ahead and check the notes. Now let's have a look at DITA-specific authoring functionality. Just like in the previous releases, we continue to work on expanding the options for customizing the appearance and the content of PDF publications. The first new customization feature to mention here is the configurable back cover page. You can see as an example of it here, and you can also find that in our updated motorcycle demo on our demo site, demo.cortana3d.com. This motorcycle demo on our demo website now also contains a 2-column landscape-oriented A5 document to show you an example of what is possible now. The second customization feature we'd like to highlight here is related to the generic IPC specification. Here you can now define the visibility, width, and alignment of columns for parts catalogs. PDF rules are now also supported in custom plugins, not only in out-of-the-box specification components as before. And last but not least, you can see the total page count displayed in your PDF publications. These were a couple of the main features for DITA authoring. Let's also have a look at S1000D. First, the illustration ICN can now be displayed in HTML publications, as you can see here in the red box. Previously, they were displayed in the PDF publications only. References to external publications can now be created for S1000D6 data modules in the document editor and displayed in the HTML and PDF publications. Change marks are now displayed when opening an updated PM or SCPM data module in standalone RapidAuthor. So the author can track the changes easier than before. And now for a couple of general authoring improvements. First, our approach to using context geometry has slightly changed or has been simplified. We try to show you an example in a minute. Previously, you might remember we used 2 terms, background and context. These have been combined into one single term, context. Transparency and context are now independent properties of the geometry. The context property of geometry affects only the rendering in 3D publications and the line style in 2D illustrations. And the transparency property determines whether items behind this current geometry are visible in the 2D illustration. That might sound complicated. It's not. You have more options now. We will try to show you a couple of examples of how that works on the next slide. Now, to better illustrate this functionality, we will set the selection highlight mode to translucent shell. In Rapid Catalog, context geometry is defined per page. Here we set 1/2 of the drill body as context geometry, which shows it as transparent in both 2D and 3D by default. In the 2D preview, its line style is also changed to dashed, and you can select a different line style for context geometry in 2D images. The style is selected here from the Cortana 2D editor style library. Previously, context geometry was always shown with fixed transparency. For compatibility, this remains the default. However, you can now also disable the transparency override and control transparency individually for each contact object in the material editor. We recommend this for new projects as it makes the publication independent of program options. As you can see, the context object is now no longer transparent. The line style in 2D remains unchanged. Now we define transparency for our context object and the remaining non-context part of the drill body in the material editor. Both parts become transparent in 2D and 3D, but the dashed line style is applied only to the context part. Transparency and context settings are now handled independently. In this new release, you can also specify context geometry rendering modes in the publishing options. Here you can select between default, X-ray, translucent shell, and a new mode, hidden. We will show you a bit later. These rendering modes can also be selected in the resulting publication using this new setting. You can easily see the difference between X-ray mode translucent shell, and the new rendering option I mentioned, hidden. In RapidManual, you can set geometry as context or remove it from context using the corresponding buttons or the context menu. The geometry retains the context flag for the entire procedure. Transparency settings, 3D rendering modes, and line styles for 2D images work the same way as in Rapid Catalog. Geometry can now be trimmed or cut by a cylinder, not just by a box. This allows you to create holes easily and quickly, and we will have a look at how this works. First, you select the cylinder as cutting shape. Then you can define its quality, so the number of side faces of the prism that approximates the cylinder. Then you position the cylinder, specify its diameter, and click on Cut. Now you have a new hole. Here the difference between the quality settings for holes is quite obvious. Next, applicability is now supported for the pages in generic parts catalogs. Previously, it was available for DPL rows only. First, we need to create a reference table. Our table in this example contains two items, Model A and Model B. Then we will specify applicability in the page metadata. We do this for both IPC pages in our example. And let's see the result. Our IPC contains two pages with different applicability values. When we use the applicability filter, this drop-down menu on the right, we see only the page with the selected applicability value. Item variants for DPL rows are now supported by the generic IPC specification. They are used here in the same way as in S1000D or in ATA documents. The item variant is an additional letter modifier to the item number. It can be any letters except the letters O and I. Now, the complete unique item number in the generic parts catalog is item plus item variant. In a DPL table, a row with an item variant is processed like any other row, so it directly affects the hierarchy. We have added item variants to this fourth item in the DPL table. And as you would expect, this is how it looks like in the resulting publication. And of course, there are many smaller changes. To just mention a few, first, support for 3D PDF output has been discontinued starting with this release. We have talked to quite a few of you in the past and explained the reasons, etc. It's just not a very useful format. Also, assemblies can now be excluded from your selection when using the selection find items command. And this is useful when you need to perform operations on multiple items, for example, to delete items. Now, after this overview for general authoring changes, we will also have a look at what's new for 2D. First, we will show you new schemes, starting with the numeric one. The numeric scheme allows you to define whether zeros are added to the beginning of your callout and define the length of callouts. We will set this style as, and you can also specify numbering steps. We have now set the style as default and will create several callouts. Here you can see the numbering step. Now, if you remove some callouts, you can also easily renumber them. You just click on any of the callouts and choose Renumber, selected from the context menu. Another new feature is postfixes and prefixes you can add to your callouts. As required by some standards like S1000D, you can encapsulate the callout's value. If this is on, it limits the selected area of the callout to the main text of the callout, so without prefix or postfix. Now let's also see how the alpha scheme works. Here you can choose between upper and lowercase, and you can also exclude some letters if this is required by your standard. So for instance, you can exclude O and I if you use S1000D. The alpha scheme supports renumbering prefixes and postfixes just in the same way as the numeric scheme. Stroke, fill, and text styles can now be applied at the group level, affecting all applicable objects within the group. Hopefully, this will save you a lot of authoring time. In this object, we have a group containing several polybezier lines. If we enable the pick tool, the pick point tool, we can easily select and change the style of a particular object in the group. With the pick tool, we can select a whole group and then apply the stroke style to all objects in the group. And we can do the same for the fill style. So you do not have to select all objects in the group any longer. Points can now be selected using the Lasso tool. Previously, points could only be selected using a rectangular frame. To do this, first you enable the pick point tool. Then you can select points using the freehand lasso. Or you can use the polygonal lasso. Just like that. Hidden lines can now be preserved in 2D illustrations. Previously, all hidden lines were removed when a 2D illustration was generated. Now you can enable or disable their removal with a new button called Keep Hidden Lines. We will demonstrate one simple use case with this example, a flange with a hole, which you can see on this first screenshot. To start, we will change its orientation. We will look at it from the side and then generate two images with the button enabled and disabled. Here we see the object from the side. And when you generate a 2D illustration with the button disabled, you can see no hole from the side. When you enable the button, the location of the hole becomes visible. You can then edit this illustration further in 2D Editor Pro if you want to remove unnecessary lines for your drawing. And of course, we will also have more 2D authoring improvements. To give you a couple of examples, existing project illustrations can now be manually linked to the current IPC page. And precision for linear, angular, and percentage values can now be specified in the options. Now let's have a look at a couple of publication features. We have added a new selection mode called Isolate to HTML publications. This mode makes only the selected items visible and all other objects hidden. This mode makes it easier to identify and examine individual objects. Tooltips can now be configured in all RapidManual publications. You can define the format and display metadata using the publishing option called Tooltip Format. And you can select the appropriate metadata from the list of available ones. Let's preview the result. This is what the tooltips in our example now look like. And that's it for your quick overview of new functionality in our 25.12 release. As always, this was just a selection of features, and we have many more smaller changes and improvements for you in the background. For a full list, please refer to the release notes. And as always, I mentioned the updated motorcycle demo before. Check out our demo website if you want to see examples of some of the functionality. And now let's have a look at your questions. Let me see if that works. I've read that there's a couple of updates to the town hall functionality in Teams. We will test it. If this is a bit smoother, we will make use of it in the next webinar. So the first question I can see, where can I find the document that describes the use of PDF rules? I will let the team answer that. First, regarding the document about PDF rules, it's included in Rapid specification as part of Rapid Developer, and the document name is modification of specification components of DITA type. Very good. And the second question here, I don't think there's an update yet. When will Solid Edge 2026 be supported? That is in 2606, which is scheduled to be released in Q3 this year. I think early Q3. I don't think we have a fixed planned release date yet, but feel free to add to the answer and correct me if I'm wrong. But this year, yes, in the next release. Can I display context geometry as translucent shell during authoring in Rapid Catalog the same way as in HTML publications? Let's see what the team has to say. That was probably during the presentation of context geometry. There's no normal refresh button. I can probably refresh it by doing that. I don't know why it sometimes refreshes and sometimes doesn't. Anyway, displaying context geometry as translucent shell during authoring. In 2512, various context geometry rendering modes are available only in the HTML publication, but this feature will be available in authoring tools in 2606. As mentioned, a bit later this year, early Q3. Then I think this is it for today. As mentioned, if there's anything else you can think of later that you would like to have more details on, feel free to contact us afterwards. And we will make the recording available for your colleagues who might not be able to make it today after it's uploaded. That usually takes a couple of hours, I think. Good. Then everyone, enjoy the rest of your day and have a great week, and talk to you very soon.